wise ceremony, and he was basically saying that the white man doesn't know that if they cut the forest, they won't have anything to eat or to drink. And this was by the time I was already involved 20 years in research that found exactly the same conclusion. To take out the forest, the rain stops, etc. I was driven to tears listening on one hand, because why am I doing all this, thousands of scientists, airplanes and satellites, etc. And he already knew it. So I met him some few months later of this, when I heard this, I asked him, I said, David, how do you know that? He said, well, ancestral knowledge. And I asked again, but how did your ancestors learn that taking the forest would stop the rain? He said, they learned from the spirits of the forest. So there we come, and I start thinking that there are alternative ways or pathways to knowledge. So I made a very quick illustration on some of those, and the first one is an animation from ISA, Instituto Socioambiental.
We are here, and have been for thousands of years, and despite everything, we continue determined and strong, standing firm. You can pretend you aren't bothered, that you aren't looking, but we're here, fighting for a long time, and now, more than ever, fighting against the clock. If there's any diversity left in the forest, it's thanks to us. If there's rainfall in the city or the countryside, it's also thanks to us. If medicine has somewhere to look for new cures, it's because we're here. But we can't go on being ignored, spending our lives being pushed out of the way. That's why we're going to keep on resisting, determined, standing firm, because we are the forest. And the forest is us.
E a floresta somos nós.
I think it's very pungent message, right? Nonetheless, we still don't have sufficient support for these people. So the next, I put an animation from that, which brings another perspective of support to the Indian cause.
Clearing the Amazon for agriculture and industry is already causing flying rivers to dry up, leading to drought and hotter temperatures across South America. If this pattern continues, swaths of the continent may be reduced to desert in a matter of decades. In response, a radical movement is working intensely to keep the rainforest and the flying rivers alive. The northwest of the Peruvian Amazon is the territory of the Wampis Nation, a community of over 15,000 people who manage over 130,000 square kilometers of land. These indigenous people have lived in the rainforest for thousands of years, practicing sustainable hunting, fishing, and agriculture. For the Wampis, protecting the rainforest has long meant fighting invaders. Between the 15th and 17th centuries, Wampis people resisted and expelled the Spanish colonists who exploited the rainforest. Today, the Wampis Nation are still battling extractive industries and the policies that sanction them. For instance, since the 1960s, the Peruvian government has been licensing the Wampis territory to corporations for gold mining and oil extraction. These activities poison the rivers, clear thousands of trees, and threaten the Wampis' way of life. In 2015, after years of protests and negotiations, the community formed the autonomous territorial government of the Wampis Nation. While the Wampis people remain Peruvian citizens, they seek recognition as a government responsible for their own lands, forests, and internal affairs. In its policies, the Wampis Nation prioritizes collective land ownership, cultural preservation, and conservation of animals, plants, and natural cycles that protect the rainforest. This is the foundation of their philosophy of Tarimot Puit, or living in harmony with nature to ensure food, friendships, and quality of life. The high, humid forest of the Wampis Nation is crucial to the flying river cycle, transpiring over 34 million liters of water a day that flow to Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. To track this output, Wampis scientists measure rainfall, monitor the wind, and weigh water levels in leaves and soil. One of their climate goals is to defend this and other natural systems, including native soil that acts as a carbon sink and the forest itself as a fire barrier. The Wampis Nation constantly battles corporations that threaten these systems. Between 2016 and 2018, the community fought illegal gold mining along the Santiago River. They organized protests, uncovered mercury pollution, guarded the area, and attacked illegal machinery for months, eventually expelling the miners. And in 2017, the Wampis Nation successfully petitioned a court to bar a private oil company from their land. While these are significant victories, the Wampis Nation and other indigenous groups need more recognition and support. Indigenous people and local communities live in and manage more than a quarter of the world's land, but only have legal ownership to a small percentage of it. And less than 1% of international climate and forest funds go to their crucial conservation efforts. This is despite the fact that forests managed by indigenous people have better survival rates. The Amazon is often described with the language evocative of a giant organism, one that grows, dies, breathes in carbon dioxide, and exhales oxygen. The processes that sustain it weave together in a complex and often invisible web of water, air, soil, and human activity, both destructive and protective. We are far from understanding it in its entirety, but some are closer than others. If you want to learn more about Indigenous land management, check out Nia Terra, an organization dedicated to supporting Indigenous peoples protecting their homelands and sharing their methods of care with the world. Click here to learn more and get involved.
This two little videos just to bring the issue of how part of this equation that is not properly, I think, framed. And this is the fact that if we have only the reservations protected these days, then we're still not safe. We're still not, even though it's a very large part of it. This is Hilton Phillipson. Hilton. Bringing a recognizes to Cacique Roni, maybe you can talk about this later, and this Xingu Indians. And I brought this message showing the image of the Xingu reservation, because that's an example of what fire can do if, as Anders mentioned, if the areas surrounding are not properly taken care of. This is in 2012, fire broke into the reservation, and from the satellite, 30% of the reservation burned. You could argue that this forests inside the reservation were already disturbed, maybe, but this is another fact. We cannot protect only the reservation. We have to really look comprehensively on all the continents, because otherwise we will eventually end up in, and the fires, when they happen, not only outside the reservations, they produce smoke. Smoke dries out the clouds. They reduce rainfall even in the areas that are still protected. I talked this morning about degradation. You can see here the green line. Lots of 2 million square kilometers in the Amazon degraded. This is the size of Greenland already. We lost for the climate service. And then there is a third axis of how, and this was the inspiration for this session initially, how we can learn from the Indian sense of reverence. This Ayrton Krenak is a thinker and an Indian philosopher who has made many statements. This is one. White people think that the environment is natural resource, like a warehouse where you go and grab things. That's how we've been dealing with the environment. For indigenous people, it's a place where you should tread softly because it's full of other presence. In this statement, there is reverence. You cannot just go there and grab things if there are other presences there, which are equally valuable. Ailton Krenak, last week or a few days ago, he was admitted in the Brazilian Academy of Letters. So he's the first native to be admitted to the Brazilian Academy of Letters. And he has very bestsellers in Brazil, I don't know outside, but one is this book, Ideas to Postpone the End of the World. And it's really inspiring in many ways. And when in his discourse of taking the seat in the academy, he mentioned that he was not going to favor or to foster the Portuguese language because it was an European language. Instead of Lusophony, he would support a symphony with the other Indian languages. So it is very, in the sense, very inspiring. And this is another venue that most of us don't think about. How we can learn from the natives to reinstate reverence in our culture. You know, why we have always to have an excuse, economic or technical or otherwise, logical, to protect the preciousness of nature. Why can't we just revere nature and then just protect? Okay, this is, then I have another message which is different than these three, given by Paul Stamets. He's a specialist in fungi, and I think this is an interesting message to close my part.
Mushroom mycelium represents rebirth, rejuvenation, regeneration. Fungi generate soil that gives life. The task that we face today is to understand the language of nature. My mission is to discover the language of nature of the fungal networks that communicate with the ecosystem. And I, in particular, believe nature is intelligent. The fact that we lack the language skills to communicate with nature does not impugn the concept that nature is intelligent. It speaks to our inadequacy of our skill set for communication. We have now learned that there are these languages that are occurring and communication between each organism. If we don't get our act together and come in commonality and understanding with the organisms that sustain us today, not only will we destroy those organisms, but we will destroy ourselves. We need to have a paradigm shift in our consciousness. What will it take to achieve that? If I die trying, but I'm inadequate to the task to make a course change in the evolution of life on this planet, okay, I tried. The fact is, I tried. How many people are not trying? If you knew that every breath you took could save hundreds of lives into the future, had you walked down this path of knowledge, wouldn't you run down that path of knowledge as fast as you could? I believe nature is a force of good. Good is not only a concept, it is a spirit. And so hopefully the spirit of goodness will survive.
Hopefully the spirit of goodness will survive. And that message drives me back to the beginning of my talk, where I said the language nature that the native people have a communication with, I miss. As a scientist, I miss it. I have to go there, put instruments, measure, get data, put my graphs, nice graphs here, convince my colleagues, and they knew it from their heart or from their spirits to begin with. We could spare all this, travel of producing all these mountains of data to convince people who have no connection with the subject, with nature. And while we could spare a lot of time, if we could just go forward. Ailton Krenak says that the future is ancestral. There is an incredible wisdom in this statement. The future is ancestral. If we look to the ancestrality, we have nature. Nature is the largest possible conceivable pot of technology that we could imagine. So the future is ancestral. We have to go back to the connection with nature. Okay? Thank you. We are starting a new session. This session is about reverence and will be moderated by Anders from Rainforest Foundation Norway. And then we will start by giving a presentation, and then I will follow him, and there will be a panel discussion thereafter. Okay? Go ahead.
Thank you.
15 minutes.
So I've been asked to cut down my presentation, so I'll do my best and cut out some things. But all right, I'm Anders Krogh. I'm from Norway, Rainforest Foundation Norway, and I'm going to talk today about my experience with living with an indigenous group in the Amazon, and sort of show how they are connected to the forest, and perhaps we can have a discussion about if there are something we can learn from such peoples in the modern society today. Maybe there's something we have lost that we need to regain to save nature on the planet. But my story goes back to this age. So I've been, since I was very, very young, I didn't like the society I grew up in. And that was basically because I thought that we didn't treat nature well. I didn't like the destruction I saw, I didn't like anything of it, and I was sort of longing for another society where I could see more respect for nature. And then I was introduced to the library of my grandfather at the age of 7, 8. And he was really, really, really interested in indigenous peoples. And when I read those books about indigenous peoples in the far corners of the world, living in harmony with nature, I fell in love at once and actually decided I wanted to live there. So when I was 23, I actually went to the Amazon, to a very remote part of the Amazon called the Val do Javari in Brazil and Valle de Javari in Peru. It's one of the most inaccessible areas in the Amazon, and where there has been documented that there lives uncontacted tribes still. And I went to the Matses people, and my plan was to basically live there for the rest of my life. I wanted to move there. Now, I didn't move there, but that will be a talk for another day why I didn't remain there. But the blue stars you see there are the 3 villages that I lived in. So this is the Matses. This is a typical face of a Matses woman. And you can clearly see that she resembles the jaguar. And so she has this, the Matses girls, when they get their first period, they get these holes in the nose, and they get these whiskers to resemble the jaguar. And they also get that hole in the under lip, where they have this stick hanging. It symbolizes the prey of the jaguar. And for the Matses people, I'll just go quickly over these. Just some Matses means people. So we are the people, they say, and they speak Matses, so they speak the language of the people. And there's a few things that's really struck me with this society. One of the things that maybe one of the largest contrasts between the society I came from and this society was the conception of quantity and time. So here I was finding myself in a society, well-functioning society, that only counted to 3. That's the most quantity they had. And everything more than 3 was that pain. And that pain means many, much, and it also means enough. And that is sort of telling about the Matses. They always, if they have that pain more than 3, they have enough. And they are in constant contact with the surroundings. And they need to be that. They have this. This is wild tobacco that they make this snuff powder from. I don't have photos of them, but they have these tubes that they blow up to in the nose of the peoples with using this powder, and it puts them in a sort of an altered state. It's not very powerful, but it's quite altered. And through that state, they are in constant contact with the animal and plant spirits. So for the Matses, there are 150,000 described species in the Amazon, like plant species. When you walk in the forest with the Matses, from the tiniest ant to the largest tree, they have a name for everything, absolutely everything. You can point at anything in this forest, and they have a name for it. So possibly when you point at, much of the things you point at aren't normal sounds, but they would have a name on it. And every animal in the forest has a connection to a plant. And they have the same spirit with which they can communicate and come in contact with through Nunu, like we call this altered state, and also through dreaming. And it's really important